Welcome to the Bear Trap Podcast.
Welcome.
We're your hosts. I'm Paul.
I'm Jay.
We just
Nice
have to
you back.
we apologise for our absence.
As you can see, we sat in a field. We've changed it all up.
Yeah, you can see the Milky Way and shit. We've decided to start interviewing interesting people, and this is going to be episode 1 of the new Bear Trap Podcast. It's not going to be called the new Bear Trap.
It's like Ep 14 /
It is Ep 14, but this is number 1 because we've redone everything, rehashed everything.
We certainly have.
And today, if you've watched us last podcast, you will know that I'm obsessed with aliens. Jay's now obsessed with aliens. So we actually got 2 people who wrote the book, who they are, and what they're up to.
It's by Stephen and Leslie Shaw.
Yep. And the most lovely people I've ever met in my life.
From California.
From California. The book is about aliens, and it's their theory. I've started reading the book. I have not finished the book. And it's basically about their theory on what aliens are and why they're here.
It's written.
Everything else. It's an amazing book, genuinely. £12 on Amazon. Go buy it. We're doing the intro after we've interviewed them. They talk about the Anunnaki.
Races of people.
Races of people. They've blown my tiny little mind, and I hope that comes across in the edit that I do, because it's going to take me 2 days to process everything that's just been said, and we didn't even cover hardly any of the book.
We had questions that we couldn't fit in. We just covered everything. I actually sat there like a fool and said nothing. I was just listening to them.
Honestly,
they just riffed and
they did most of the work.
We did nothing. We sat and you're just watching us watch them.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm genuinely blown away. We are going to have them on again.
Yeah, we've got loads more to discuss, really. So we didn't really touch the surface.
Please like.
And subscribe.
Please subscribe. And please leave a comment, because we're going to have them on, hopefully, again, very, very soon, if you have any questions for them.
Yeah.
At the end of our video, they also give all their details, and they're actually wanting people who've had experiences.
Yeah, on their Instagram.
So go follow them on Instagram and stuff. All the details will be in the description. So, in all honesty, sorry we've been away. We hope this is better for you. It's been blown my mind.
Yeah.
But genuinely blew my mind, because I've experienced some of these things.
Paul's got a lot more like mutual experiences that obviously I don't have. So you've come up with some cool stuff. I have nothing to add to it, but just listening to it, brilliant.
Yeah.
So but anyway,
without further ado,
here they are.
Here's Leslie and Stephen Shaw and our interview. And the beginning's a bit dodgy because this is the first ever interview we've ever done, and we just went big.
Nervous
aliens.
as.
So enjoy it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you flip side.
Whenever that may be.
I'm going to have to do it now. Peace.
Peace.
Enjoy. Welcome to the show. We have Stephen and Leslie, who wrote the book, Who They Are and What They're Up To. It's here.
Yep.
Brilliant book, by the way. It is. Been reading it. Very fascinating. So as we were just talking, is it your past experiences that have inspired you to write this book?
Yeah.
Yes.
For me, really about the age of 30, which was 34 years ago now, I decided I wanted to start to get to the bottom of what was going on in my family, going back to my great-grandparents that came. There were Newmans. Their last name was Newman. They came over from Germany and moved to England, and then became the Roes, because my grandmother married Harry Rowe and then became the Shaws. So I'm Stephen Shaw, of course.
Right.
So anyways, I was at the age of 3 living in Woodland Hills, California, which is the suburb of Los Angeles. It was a very rural area at that time. And I would be commonly visited by this invisible being type of creature that would jump on my stomach and my chest when I was 3 years old of age, and kind of playfully, just like a fairy or something
Boing,
like that,
boing.
And I was told by my parents, from my earliest memories go back to like 1.5, but I was told by my parents that we had this family spirit guide, and the spirit guide, which you read in the book, is called Oglegli. In case you didn't know how to pronounce it, but it's pronounced Oglegli.
I did not.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Okay.
there it is.
Anyway, that's Oglegli, and he was a tall, slender character that would show up when people needed help or just show up at times, whatever. Saved my uncle's life at one
Yeah,
point.
sometimes family interventions, you know,
Yeah.
like
And so
protecting a
I kind of
protector.
I grew up in a strange family. Number one, we were living in California, and my parents spoke strong British, Northern England accents, and I didn't tell my friends at school that about these kind of things. They say either you're lying, or you're crazy, or you're living in a haunted house. Okay, so
Yeah.
I didn't really talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
So
you want to fit in. You don't want to be the
Yeah,
haunted
no.
house kid, you know.
so around about the age of 10, I was sleeping in a bunk bed. My brother was 6 years older than me, so he was sleeping in the bottom of the bunk bed. And I was awakened in the middle of the night by this strange sound that I didn't recognize. I knew it wasn't the dog. I knew that for sure. So I got out of the bed and I started walking down the hallway. There was a little bit of light because the kitchen light was on, a little light, so I could see where I was going. But my heart was racing, and I could feel my blood pumping. I was definitely in adrenal mode, and I was literally scared. I said, I don't know what I'm going to see. And just before it got to turn into the living room to the right, I just go black. I was definitely not in a dream state.
Yeah,
Nothing like that.
And he's scared, and his
Yeah.
heart's pounding, and he didn't just go back to sleep, right? Obviously.
The next, yeah, exactly. So the next thing I remember is that I'm back in my bed. This is like 3 or 4 hours later, and I don't have any memory about turning that corner. And again, I didn't talk about it really, because a lot of weird things were happening anyway. So then,
But the
about
rest
the
of the
age,
family, were sort of experiencing this
well,
kind
yes,
of thing too.
yeah. My mom never really took on to the alien part. She was more the spiritual type thing. But
yeah,
but
Philip saw a gray alien in his room.
that was
one time.
1982.
And that's when we started to realize, oh, this might be what we're dealing with instead of
A tall gray alien.
one of the 6 foot tall, spindly,
So
skinny ones with the big black eyes.
what I wanted to do, as far as like for continuity here, about the age of 11 or 12, I saw my first UFO.
Yeah.
And this was also at the same house, the Fallbrook house that I grew up in.
Southern Cal.
And it was at nighttime. It was in the winter time because it was dark. And I just happened to be looking out the front door window, and there was this large orange globe that was moving in a horizontal direction from south to north, and it kind of paused a little bit, and then it kept on going. And I looked at it, and I says, "That's not an airplane." And it was nowhere near the Burbank airport. And I said, it's no blinking lights.
And it was silent.
Yeah. So the next day, what I did, I called Griffiths Park Observatory and asked them if they had seen anything or there was anything reported. And they say, no, our telescopes are not pointed. Our telescopes are pointed up and not down. Milad. so anyway, to get more serious here, I kind of said, okay, well, I saw a UFO, big deal, So, anyways, also during this time frame, when I was about 8, I saw one time come into my bedroom what I call garden gnomes. They were kind of shimmery. They were about like a foot tall, and there were like 4 or 5 of them, and they were literally like you would consider to be garden gnomes. And I just kind of looked at them. I kind of got scared, and I turned over. Now, a few years later, my brother turned about 6 or 8 years old. He started sleeping in the closet, in our closet in my bedroom, and for about 2 years he slept there. And I asked Philip. I said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? And he told me. He said, no, I'm afraid of the little men that come at night. And he was seeing the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like say, oh man, you're crazy or something like that. Oh,
yeah, that makes sense.
You're bullocks. Yeah. You're bleeding bullocks. I didn't say anything like that. So, anyway, so I believed him because I had seen the same thing.
Yeah. And then I saw my first UFO. It took a long time for me to see one. It was in 2005, so not that long ago, and but Stephen had seen, by this time, he had seen 3. And he had all these bizarre, what we now realize are probably alien abduction experiences.
Right.
And, but I hadn't seen anything. And to be honest, I was a little jealous, It's like, I want to see something too, And then 2005, in winter of 2005, there it was up in the sky. And, before that, I believed him like 95%, 98%, but until you see it for yourself.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Finally it clicks into 100%, I believe now.
Yeah, we're driving back from an art meeting from Joshua, actually from 29 Palms. We're going through Joshua Tree, California, which is another hotspot, by the way.
Yeah, we sort of live in a hotspot area for UFO.
It's on the 33rd parallel, if that makes any sense. It's like a 33rd parallel.
Seems to be a lot of sightings along that latitude.
Are you? 33rd parallel. Do you live near an airbase or anything?
Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the 29 Palms Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center is in 29.
It's the largest one in the world.
And so we were driving from 29 Palms through Joshua Tree to our Yucca Valley home along the highway. And I saw up ahead of us this white light through the windshield. It was round and white and about twice as bright as, say, Venus. So pretty bright up in the sky. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's just a plane coming into Palm Springs Airport or something, because that's, pretty nearby. But it didn't behave like a plane. And as I stared at it, it was getting brighter and brighter. And it didn't have any of those blinking lights that planes have, like the extra running lights. Yeah. And it didn't, and it was hovering, our planes don't generally hover. And it was silent. So it couldn't have been a helicopter, because those are loud as hell usually, right? And then so we're just staring at it, and we're heading towards it pretty fast at 65 miles an hour, the highway there, and it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter as we get closer. And then suddenly it shot away north and was gone over the northern horizon in a quarter of a second, just that fast, and it's so fast. Visually it streaked out into a line, and then the back of the line collapsed behind it. And it had to have been going, if I were going to guess, like 20,000 miles an hour, 10,000 miles an hour.
A really, really, really good clip, hypersonic for sure.
And we know that they can go very fast. We've this one sighting in Michigan, Lake Michigan. There's a national weather station right there on East Lake Michigan, and there was a mass sighting. Like 300 people called the cops and said, "There's a UFO in my backyard," essentially. And
this was in the 80s, right, Les?
Yeah, it was like 86, and it's not in this book. It'll be in the next book. I just missed it. I said certainly should have been included, and it's an important sighting, and they were actually clocked.
He has a question.
It's all right.
I was going to say they're clocked at 72,000 miles an hour on the radar of the weather station, so we know they can go that fast.
I mean, there has been a lot of mass sightings, hasn't there? In your book, you've mentioned quite a few where there's several hundred people phoning the UFO hotline.
Yeah, exactly. And I tried to do that, a single sighting, a single person sighting, except for some important ones like the Travis Walton event, which actually has 6 other witnesses, to the UFO.
Abduction, the fire in the sky,
the fire in the sky story from Arizona,
from the 70s,
that's in the book too. But mostly I concentrated on mass sightings, because that's where you have 70 witnesses, or
or hundreds,
and then it's definitely a UFO then if 70 people report it. Almost always, once in a while, something will be a missile that test or something that people realize was going on or something.
Those do happen, of course.
But when there's no forthcoming explanation for it, then after that, then we know what to call them, UFOs.
I think my favourite one, you don't mention it in the book, is the Brazilian one.
Virginia.
The guy was taken and up in the ship and is that the one?
No, the one
crash yacht,
it crashed in Brazil. It's on the film
Moment of Contact.
Oh, Right,
Is it
and he just helped
Riviera?
one of the aliens for a while, right?
Yeah, and a
Yeah,
soldier
okay.
died because he picked the alien up and died the next day.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because to me, like I've watched quite a few documentaries, and that one to me really hit home with me because it seemed truthful. Like the people who were speaking, my truthometer
Yeah, it was
was like I
going, yeah.
believe every single word. I don't know why. And I mean, when you read these things, do you believe every single thing that you read?
No,
No.
what happens is that there's definitely a pattern in some of the stuff we see. So if suddenly something doesn't fit the pattern, then I might be suspicious of the source. If
Right.
it's especially if it's just one single person.
There was a lot of stuff happening in the 50s because there was this whole panic about UFOs and about all different types of things. There was a lot of crazy stuff that was out there. We have a couple books that, that basically stuff that was in the newspapers about people just saying outlandish, really crazy stuff that, you really have to, beg the question, like, little like 2 foot aliens that
Yeah.
are running like 60 miles an hour that are just look like a dog, and or there are these famous ones where like people were faking UFOs landing like they were cut out of cardboard, and just to get
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
attention,
Now to
Yeah.
that
get
kind of
clicks.
stuff.
Now it's to get
But
clicks,
like
right?
in 1964, was a deputy or sheriff,
Oh,
Lon- Lonnie
Socorro.
Zamora.
Zamora.
We call it Lonnie Zamora, 64, Socorro, New Mexico.
April
April
24.
24. Yeah, this happened April 24.
To help
Socorro,
remember it,
Lonnie
right? Yeah.
Zamora. Yeah, he came across. He was driving.
He was
It
a
was
cop,
a
so
cop. He was driving, and he saw this craft that was ahead of him by like about what, maybe about 50 yards, maybe.
well, he was involved in a car chase. He was in the middle of a car chase. He was chasing somebody way out on the highway, and he heard a loud bang, an explosion, and he thought, he said, to heck with this person I'm chasing. I'm going to go investigate what might be an explosion. And so he thought it might be a mining shack for this. So he went down this dirt road where he knew was like this mining encampment or whatever. And as he turned the corner, he saw this egg-shaped UFO with what he thought were children standing around working on it, looking at it. There were two of them, and they were walking around the ship.
Like about 10 or 12-year-olds, about that size.
Yeah.
That's what he
Yeah.
thought. He thought he was looking at either very tiny adults or big children. But then he got closer and realized that their eyes were too large and black, and their heads were a little too large.
And they're too skinny too.
And very skinny. But that's, like when you see a 10-year-old kid, sometimes their
of them
heads
are.
do look a
Yeah.
little large because they're skinny. And a lot of times they're reported, especially the smaller grays, as looking like 10-year-old children build wise,
Yeah.
Right.
And so, but this trained observer from 50 feet was mistaking them for human, and he was watching them move, right? And so if they're moving just like we do, that means they have the same skeletal structure
Right.
and the same musculature.
Yeah.
And the more I kept hearing about this, that we actually have a lot more in common with the gray aliens than we do with any other creature on this planet that is supposed to be our closest neighbors.
Yep.
Yeah, which is the bonobo chimp,
Like
which
the
is
the
within
bonobo
1%.
chimp.
It's within 1% of being the same as humans, but tremendously different.
But
as
the
far
skeletal structure is quite different. I mean, they can't stand perfectly upright comfortably. They can
Yep.
sort of make shift to walk on two legs, but when they're frightened and run, they're on all fours, like
Right.
and take to the trees.
Yeah,
They're still
exactly.
arboreal, So we actually have a lot more physically in common with the gray aliens than we do with even our other closest relative.
Right.
And then the Nordic aliens, they're indistinguishable from human beings.
Just taller.
They look like tall Swedes, right? With
Yeah.
blue eyes, green eyes, and indistinguishable from humans.
Do they call themselves Nordic, or have you termed that Nordic?
They call themselves the Ariani,
Right.
Arianni.
Right.
And these are the ones that live under the Antarctic ice sheet.
At least one of the places.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a huge city apparently.
Right.
Yes, and so that the Admiral Byrd evidence too, and also the Valiant Thor evidence. The Valiant Thor was a spaceship just lands in Virginia, And the guy gets out and says, "Take me to your leader." I think this is in the late 50s. And he goes to the Pentagon, and he's an advisor to the Pentagon for like 3 years. He claimed to have come from Venus, but he was, and the reason he fit in so easily was he was a Caucasian, red-haired man.
Right.
That he just looked like a man.
And
So
there is one picture that does exist of him that we've seen
yeah,
a couple different
looks like a
times.
red-haired Caucasian man.
Yes. So there was yeah, it's
And so it kept coming back to they look just like us, almost. They have the same skeletal structure and musculature structure as we have. And then there's the Admiral Byrd evidence, his meeting with the Ariani under the ice sheet. And
February of 1947.
And we have a copy of that. We read it kind of 30 years ago. We were reading this stuff. And as soon as we applied the idea that these are human beings, like a splinter branch of humanity that broke away from us thousands of years ago, as soon as we started looking at it like that, so many things started to sneak in place. Like most of the time, abductees are Caucasians.
Yeah.
So why would the Ariani be taking them? Maybe because their race has been underground for thousands of years.
Caucasians only make up 16% of the Earth's population.
Right. So they're not taking like a cross section of humanity just for scientific purposes, like people thought. What they do is they find a family group that they like, and they keep taking members of that family all through their lives until they get older, and then they'll start taking their children and their grandchildren after that. So they find like a DNA line that they're particularly after that meets their criteria. And it was predominantly Caucasian, a really high percentage of Caucasian, and then
RH negative.
Green-eyed people frequently. And green eyes are a mutation or a recessive trait in humanity. So, but there's a disproportionate number of green-eyed people were being taken. And also RH negatives, the disproportionate number of RH, 4 out of 10 abductees were RH negative, and we only make up, I'm an RH negative, and we only make up one of, like 1/9 of the population.
This is where our stories cross over, actually. This is where my story and Stephen's story cross over a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When I was very little, my mum used to come upstairs where I was playing, and she could hear me talking to somebody, and this person was called Lucy. And I don't remember any of this. I was like 2 or 3. And you can ask my mum, she's adamant. Obviously, you think more ghostly, but I can't remember any of this. This is just, I just know that there was a person called Lucy who I used to play with. And then when I was about 8, that's why I believe in aliens. We were driving over the moor tops, strangely from Manchester. we were coming over the tops, and me, my brother, and my mum saw 3. They weren't planes. There were 3 of them together. And weirdly, now you've just said that, my daughter, who believes she's part Anunnaki, she's probably been listening to your. She's got green eyes, and she's R negative blood.
RH negative blood.
RH,
okay.
yeah. Is it Rhesus negative? Is that what the RH negative? Yeah.
There's some really some interesting things to go with the RH negative blood. You probably have heard of maybe like the golden blood. It's kind of like one thing that's kind of a little popular right now, but about a couple decades ago, the first people with what they call golden blood, which is RH negative, first found of the Aborigines in Australia. There's only like 50 or 60 people they found so far, but they have what is called the antigens that attach to blood typing. So there's supposed to be like 61 different antigens that will attach to like an RH negative, and the golden blood has 0. It's like pure RH negative. Right. So there's that's the rarest blood type on the Earth, and the Aborigines go back at least about 50,000 years that we've been able to find. But there is such a thing. But the RH negative is really interesting. It's it even predates it's one of these things that probably was very prevalent at a certain point in time on the Earth, but now it's become very rare. And that kind of is part of our what we, as you go through the book, you'll probably get into where what we're talking about with the Anunnaki and other stuff like that.
And we don't know. And the Basque people are taken more often than again, a disproportionate number of the people taken are Basque, considering how many Basques there are. And the Basque people have the highest incident of Rh negative. So what we don't know is, are they taking more Rh negative, therefore the numbers are showing more Basque, or if they're after Basque specifically, and therefore the numbers are showing more Rh negative.
We're not sure on that. Yeah.
But we did find that there was a Basque connection to one of the few little kernels of DNA evidence we have for our theories is this hair of the alien thing. Did you hear about this guy in Australia?
No.
He wakes up in the middle of the night and he's being straddled by a woman having sex with him, but he's paralyzed. He can't move. And she is not a normal woman. She's kind of a hybrid alien. Her hair is white and her eyes are too large and her chin was pointy and her cheekbones were pointy. He said she just didn't look human, fully human, right? So then she puts a hand on her stomach and points to the sky while they're doing this. And there was another woman in the bed as well. And supposedly they both had their way with him while he's paralyzed.
Lucky guy,
Lucky, very lucky.
I was going to say, this sounds amazing. How do I get the number?
But it might be less fun if you're terrified, because there's aliens in your bedroom. But then the next morning he wakes up and there's one of the hairs left behind by this woman is in bed with him. So he gets it analyzed, and it's clear like fishing line, and human hair doesn't come that way. Even albinos don't have clear hair; they have white hair. But so this was a mutation, but it was also tested out as human. It tested out as Basque and Gaelic and a weird segment of Chinese population that's only makes up 1% of their population, like a subset of their population. And so this bizarre mix of Gaelic and Basque and Chinese together. So, but human. It's testing out genetically as human.
The 4 base pairs, it had all the markers for being human.
But it must be a mutated human because our hair doesn't come clear. So that pointed to our theory that these beings are not coming here from distant star systems, but rather have been living on our planet since they've evolved here too with us.
Long time. Yes.
But so it's like a schism of population that we think happened at the same time as the Great Flood,
which is in the book, of course, Chapter 7.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have to apologize to my readers, including you guys, that we were wrong about Hiawatha, the Hiawatha asteroid impact crater being the correct one. Since then, they've discovered the Younger Dryas comet impact crater, and that happens to be dated to the right one.
And Lake Superior, 12,850 years ago.
So we're about to print a second edition of the first book and make that correction, and we're looking for a fellow author that's maybe a little more famous than us to write an intro for us, and then we're gonna put out the second edition with that change. But so the Younger Dryas comet struck Earth 13,000 years ago, and we surmise that in order to survive, the human population back then may have done this thing where they sank some underground arcs, they call them, like in that movie Deep Impact, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They have the same problem. They've got a killer asteroid coming at them, and they've spotted it in time to do something about it. But all they can really do is sink deep underground cities where you took your technology with you and your culture with you and the cream of your crop of your population down there with you, and unfortunately the rest of the people on the surface are just kind of screwed.
They do that now, don't they, with bunkers? You hear all the rich and famous are currently building bunkers underground.
Exactly. Especially in New Zealand, they're investing billions of dollars to make these underground palaces,
cities,
basically, even
essentially,
with
yeah.
moats, and with fire moats and everything like that to protect them. They're
Right.
investing, billions of dollars because either they really know something that's going to be happening, or they just basically say, you know what? In fact, we devote like a whole chapter in the book. In our book, I think it's chapter 8 or something like that, as far as like how commonly these extinction level events or near extinction level events um,
Occur.
occur.
Yeah.
They occur a lot more frequently than people think.
Every 5,000 years or
Yeah,
so,
or
we get hit by a
less
pretty good
less than
size,
that. So you have your
meteor or
civilization,
something
evolving, and then it gets knocked back down.
again
Well,
and again.
my having been a cave explorer for a number of years, I can tell you that it's a lot safer, climate control to live, live underground. That's
Right.
for sure.
Yep.
So yeah, you got geothermal, you got water, you got all the things you need, and it's a lot safer.
And if you have technology, you have power, and if you
Yeah,
have power, you can grow food, and
Yeah, absolutely.
essentially they're
yeah.
they're probably cozy and snug as a bug. And after the comet struck, people don't realize the devastation this kind of thing would do. I mean, you have to imagine 1,000-foot high tsunamis rushing to the coastlines of every continent in the world,
Especially the northern hemisphere.
Yep.
especially the northern hemisphere, and essentially flooding all the lowlands and uh, any cities and we tend to put our cities mainly on the coastlines, right? Because
Yep.
we have the ocean and
Ports
the
and that kind
rivers
of
and
Yeah.
stuff.
ports and
Yes.
stuff. But an enormous amount of our culture and who we were was just scraped off the planet, and that's why we hardly know anything about ourselves prior to 13,000 years ago. There's almost nothing that survived from before then.
Well, there's a lot of people who talk about this. Like, do you think like the Bible, the flood in the Bible? I don't know if you're religious, but
Absolutely, I
Mhm.
think that the Noah story is one of the
Yes.
many ones there are.
That was one of the ones I thought was the biggest fairy tale as a child
I know. I
growing up.
thought, yeah,
But
sure, but it
now
turns out it's true.
the evidence shows that yeah, it did happen. There's 1,200 separate flood myths,
yeah.
All around the
different
world,
Are,
yeah,
1,200
are you
different
religious?
a little bit. We're more Eastern religion than we are Western religion.
Buddhist,
Okay.
We
something like that.
practiced Kundalini
I'm
raising
Taoist. I'm
practices,
Taoist
and
Buddhist
Yeah.
mostly. I was a
yeah,
Unitarian for a while, but actually, yeah, I'm more that because I studied and taught Tai Chi for decades, and
right.
for me, it just made, and that was an acupuncturist for 23 years.
Mhm.
So for
Yeah.
me, the Eastern religions and the Eastern languages just make a lot more sense for who I am
And
Right.
as an
I had read
individual.
this
So
this book that came out. This man in the 1700s named Fraser. He spent a lot of time going around the world, and he had isolated 500 separate cultures with a flood myth in their ancient lore.
Yeah.
yeah,
And we're talking all over the place. Samoa and the Aleutians, and everybody's got the Hopi have a flood myth in their most ancient stories.
Eskimos. Yeah,
And
Yeah.
then, but the 1700s is a long time ago. Since then, there a lot more of them have been discovered. There's like 1,200 separate Noah stories out
Yep.
there. Where there's some guy either builds an ark or digs
Yeah.
a underground cavern and survives somehow the cataclysm underground, or go to high ground sometimes in some of the myths. It's like if the myths were from the Andes areas, they were told to just go to way high ground, and they'd be safe from the devastation.
and as Leslie's like hearkening to, the other commonality is that there was always a forewarning.
Right.
The forewarning may be a year. We don't know whether it's a year or two of forewarning, but there was foreknowledge, which
Yeah.
means that whoever or we ourselves were very advanced, at least astronomically, as far as
Somebody on the planet
we
was.
knew.
Somebody had
We knew.
advanced astronomy.
Well, the
Right.
Sumerians did, didn't they?
Yeah,
Yes, of
Sumerians
course.
have it back.
Well, they were like
Their
a little
stuff
more
goes
recent.
well. Recent. They're 6,000 years old, and one of the earliest cultures we know about. But even their 6,000-year-old tablets talk about the before time, and the Sumerians are a bizarre culture. I mean, people don't realize if you don't study them, but they knew about all of the outer planets.
Yes.
So and they count them from the outside in, which I
Yeah.
thought was
Right.
very interesting.
As if they
like
was on the
Pluto
way.
is one,
Yeah,
and
like
Neptune
if
is
you're on the
two.
way in, yeah, exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
like
enough.
they're stop
Turn left at
one, stop
Pluto.
two, like they're flying in on
So
like Nibiru planet, right, coming in from the outside into our solar system and
yeah.
back out.
Just on that, do you not believe that aliens are from other planets then?
See, that's the thing is so we were just talking about 13,000 years ago and the schism that caused our race to be in two, people that still had their technology and the rest of us that were shoved back into the Stone Age, with
Yeah.
the cataclysm, right? Um, but if then people ask us, well, are aliens involved at all? And the whole second half of the book is exploring that possibility because um, the Anunnaki in the tablets talk about uplifting humanity from essentially from Homo erectus into Homo sapien.
And then
You
Homo
know,
sapien sapien after that.
and there's like two big missing links in human evolution. There's the one between Australopithecus and Homo habilis. That's a big one, and because Australopithecus still had like ape feet, like a
Yeah.
thumb on their feet, and Homo habilis had like human feet. So somehow, somewhere in between, there's some big thing missing here. But the one with Homo erectus to Homo sapien was 300,000 years ago, and that's what Sitchin tells us from his research, that this uplifting process happened, and it looks like that may actually have been true because there's this weird anomaly on our genetic code that looks like it's a CRISPR add-in kind of thing in our Broca's brain.
Jesse Martell talked about that in a recent lecture I went to, and showed the graphs and said, as far as we can tell, that the neocortex was tampered with about 300,000 years ago, literally to the speech center, which actually literally activated the speech center. When you think about it, if you're going to build something like pyramids, you're going to have to build a contact and communicate, build a make blueprints and make diagrams, make a plan.
We think they gave us the power of speech to just better communicate with us so that they could, tell us what to do.
So we didn't have that ability before, but we were given that ability. So it also this thing about, for instance, the Greys and whatnot, they have the ability of telepathy. I mean, that's kind of, everybody will kind of agree on that a lot of them are contacted telepathically.
All abductees basically say the same thing.
The human brain,
as
this is as my being a doctor and a Chinese medical doctor or whatever, one of the things you learn, especially about the brain, is that the more primal ways that we communicate is basically through pictures and images, okay? That's why the first languages were pictographic or some form of early proto-cuneiform or ideographic.
Even the Sumerian, ancient Sumerian is more picture.
It's all
looks more like
like
Egyptian hieroglyphs more.
Right. So, as an example, I tell people when you hear the word tree, no matter in what language that it is, right, you don't think of like, oh, TREE in English, right? You basically, your first thing, especially when you're a kid, you see a tree. Your favorite tree, maybe like a pine or a Scots pine or whatever, a cedar or oak, whatever. That's the first thing. So in other words, these brothers or these cousins, as we call them, whatever.
Intraterrestrials instead of
we call
extraterrestrials.
them intraterrestrials because they're here. They don't have to learn 7,000 different languages. They just do it on a more primal level.
Yeah, and we think that
that's the way the brain works.
Further proof that maybe our brains are quite similar. If that would because telepathy is something that when we were doing this kundalini raising work we were doing where you open your chakras through chanting and meditation and all this stuff, we started astral projecting more, and that's part of it too. But you become more telepathic as you do it. It's like a human birthright telepathy, but it's just kind of atrophied in us.
Yeah.
But it hasn't atrophied in our cousins who use it regularly, maybe to communicate with each other and certainly to communicate with us when they take us.
Well, I used to meditate quite often, and I stopped because I had a very scary experience.
I know it can be spooky. Yeah.
yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah,
I
tell us.
I used to it was one of my own. I mean, I had a person who were guiding me through the meditations and getting me into it, and then I overtook what he was teaching me, and I started listening to music while doing it. And there's one on an app, and it's called Ascension 1111. That's the hertz it's at. And I was meditating, and I saw there was one point when the music changed, and I saw a white flash, and then I was flying over these blue mountains. That's all I can describe it as.
Yeah,
And they weren't.
you were having a nice astral experience.
It
sounds
wasn't.
like.
It wasn't like blue slate. They were. Imagine Superman's cave in the film Superman.
Mm-hmm.
They were
Sure,
the
okay.
bright blue, and then something snapped me out of it when somebody said "Dad," and it was a woman's voice, an adult woman, and at that time none of my children were adults, and it freaked me out, and I woke up, and I did meditate after that, but that absolutely freaked me out. But the better thing about that is I told my friend who had also started meditating at the time, and him and his wife did the same. I didn't tell them what happened. I just said, you need to listen to this and
Right.
tell me if anything happens. And he said to me, at exactly when the music changed, he said they were sat there, and then all of a sudden, the settee disappeared behind him because him and his wife used to do it against the settee, and he fell over. And what had happened is his wife, the white flash had come towards his face, towards her face. She'd got scared, shot backwards, and they'd both fallen over. But it was at exactly the same point where the flash happened with me.
Yes, it's
Interesting.
meditation. Like for instance, like right now we're working about 40 cycles per second as far as brainwave cycles because we're in beta, right? We're on a monitor and that kind of stuff. So we're in the the least receptive. We're in the least receptive state right now. So you do things like Tai Chi or meditation, which gets down to like 7 to 11 cycles per second. You're getting into an alpha state, which is a lot more receptive. So you're basically literally almost like listening to a different radio station, let's say, okay? Your receptive capabilities is different. Then you get down to theta, which is like just above 4. Then you're even deeper. Then you get into delta between 2 and 4. Then that's the state where you can do a lot of things. Now you're like into a completely different receptive state. You can pick up on different things. You can literally pick up on people's voices or different radio stations. I used to do this in my mid 20s. This is at the Fallbrook House, and I would, after working doing cabinet making, I would have like a nap in my bedroom, and I would just be laying face up, and I would just do my breathing, my relaxing breathing. I was of course studying and teaching Tai Chi at this time, but I would literally start hearing just like it was in the room, like there was a radio station on, and there were two guys speaking. It was like a talk radio station with music in the background, that kind of stuff, and they were having a full conversation. So the first time I just got out of bed, I said, I thought my neighbor had the radio just blasting. I said, what the hell? And there was no radio on in the house, and I could repeat it. I repeated it on several different days, and I was able to pick up on it.
So he's somehow hearing into like the astral realm or something like that, and
right. But my eyes were open. I was in the room. I wasn't floating. I was just listening to it. And we're talking about the blue stuff. I remember very vividly when I turned 19, I went to Pat Collins' Hip Hypnotist Club, which was a big club on Sunset and Doheny in Los Angeles. I went there with my girlfriend at the time for my 19th birthday, 1979, July 28th. And I was the last person to get on stage to be hypnotized. She would always hypnotize, apparently, a group of 9 people. So I got on there, and I was skeptical. I didn't think I could be hypnotized. But literally, in this big club, she hypnotized all of us. It was like this, I felt like this veil came down over my eyes, and then I knew I'm hypnotized. Okay. And then she did things like passing the lighter under your hands, so you're not going to feel anything, which I didn't. And then we did the stiff as a board, light as a feather, where we lifted this person up just with our fingertips, and stood on this person that they just, they wouldn't bend. But anyways, so she asked me to visualize her, see her as being naked. Okay. Now, Pat Collins was a white woman wearing a garish wig and garish makeup,
And
and
a
she was
moo
and
because
she
she's really
wearing
big.
a star-studded muumuu, and she was heavy set. So, anyways, so she asked me to visualize her naked, and I just busted up. I was, I
Laughing.
was,
Yeah.
I was,
He
I
laughed
was
at her.
hypnotized at this time, right? So
It's so unfair.
I had no mute button. I had no mute button. So I just looked at her, and I just I saw her naked, and I just completely busted up. And
And
guess what?
she was mad after that, though. And
She made me the dog
yeah,
for
she
the
made him his
rest of the
bitch.
show.
She was his
She
bitch.
had me say,
He
she
was
had
her bitch.
God's honest truth. She had me saying to these two really pretty girls in the front row about my getting my penis back from them. On stage, I had to come up with a song about getting my penis back, and so she just made me like an idiot. But after that, when I went home, I remember going to sleep on I used to sleep on the floor at the time of life, and I was drifting off, but I was seeing these beautiful blue paintings going from right to left. Just like I was in a museum, and I was watching these beautiful blue landscapes mostly, and I could watch one go by, and then always in blue.
Yeah.
Everything was in blue, but it was perfect. And this blue thing keeps on coming up.
When I
Yeah.
first learned to astral project, we were doing the Kundalini raising work I was telling you about, and slowly but surely, I started to feel the chi energy like a palpable force. And about 6 months into it, they gave us the masters that were teaching us gave us an astral projection class, like an 8-hour seminar about it. And that night, I went home and I did the practices, and it worked. I popped out of my body, and I was about 6 inches from the ceiling. I was looking at this close up of a cottage cheese ceiling,
Which in the house at the time.
yeah, that kind of ceiling you see up there. And I was so surprised that I went, wow, and I slammed right back into my body. And I was wondering if you felt that when you came back out of the sky thing, if you kind of bounced,
Yeah.
from hitting back in.
In all honesty, when it happened, it was just such a shock because I knew I was in the house alone. There was nobody around me, and somebody went,
Yeah.
"Dad," and I just went, "Whew." But honestly, it was definitely a blue landscape, and it was I just remember mountains, and
Yep.
I've had loads of experiences where I don't know what's real, what's not real. I mean, do you think things like psychedelic drugs connect you to them?
Oh, yes. There's a couple of ways to open your chakras. One way is to meditate and chant and eat well and live that Buddhist life. And the other way is to rip them open with drugs.
which which I did not do.
No, he didn't,
No.
but I did.
Did you?
And I can speak to some bizarre experiences with that too.
Me too.
But
Yeah,
it still works. It still opens the chakras, and you can
is
still
that
start
what you feel?
experiencing weird stuff.
Sorry,
Yeah.
is that what you feel drugs do then? Just open
Well,
up.
certain kinds, like the psychedelics, I guess they call
Yeah,
them.
Hallucinogenics.
yeah.
The
That's what I
hallucinogenics.
was talking about.
Mushrooms, like, is more what people are using these
Or the
days, I
green
guess.
fairy that you'll see too with absinthe.
Absinthe, yeah, right,
Yeah.
and
Or peyote, the little
LSD,
guy, little
yeah, good
peyote
old
guy.
LSD
'Cause
from
it
the
Yeah,
interests
'60s,
it
it's
interests
Carlos
me
Gas.
with. Sorry, it
Sorry,
interests
Carlos
me with
Gas.
ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like from the
ayahuasca too is
jungles and like the
yeah, right.
shamans, and they always speak about the gods and other entities, don't they? Do
Right.
you think this is all interconnected?
Oh,
We
absolutely,
do.
absolutely, sure.
One thing we found was, like when I was doing the astral projection, I didn't have alien abductions in my family history, right? That wasn't one of my problems, and many others, but not that. But so I was enjoying astral projection. I went to Egypt a couple of
Two
times,
times.
and I went to. I love scuba diving, and I'm afraid to do it though. But you can do it astral, and you don't have to worry about drowning or sharks or the equipment malfunctioning or any other thing like that, right? So, but with poor Stephen, he would have these horrific nightmare kind of experiences in the astral plane, like
Sometimes, yeah, most of the time,
frequently,
yes, yeah.
bothered by we don't know what. It's almost like this thing that's been attached to their family He hasn't even told you about this, some of the more
Oh
weird things yet,
I haven't even gotten into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah,